A human body is mostly water, yet it can burn to ash. Elderly individuals, sometimes reduced to fine gray powder. Their furniture and walls remain almost completely undamaged. This strange event is often called spontaneous human combustion. But does the body truly ignite from within, without external fire? Let us examine a typical case from recent history. An elderly widow lived alone in her small apartment. She was 67 and had taken sleeping pills that night. The next morning, only a pile of ash remained on her floor. Her skull and torso had vanished completely in the heat, yet her left foot survived, still wearing a black satin slipper. A plastic electrical socket stood intact just 5 centimeters away. Old newspapers lay half a meter from the burn zone. They were not even yellowed by the intense heat. The official report concluded it was an accidental house fire, but a local amateur researcher rejected this mundane explanation. He believed in an inner flame that lives inside every person. He called it the fire of life, or vital heat. According to his theory, water in young bodies suppresses this fire. As people age, their total moisture content gradually declines. Then the internal flame escapes and consumes the host rapidly. This fire burns only the body, leaving surroundings untouched. The idea sounded poetic and somewhat romantic to many, yet it lacked any solid scientific foundation or proof. The researcher spent 30 years in his private workshop. He conducted experiments to demonstrate his beloved hypothesis. First, he soaked a piece of pork skin in pure alcohol. He ignited it with a match and observed the result. As soon as he removed the flame source, the fire died. He repeated the test 8 times with identical failure. He then consulted historical literature on combustion theory. He found the 18th century phlogiston hypothesis about flammable substances. That theory proposed that alcohol could trigger internal burning, but human blood contains far too much water to ignite. Even a severe alcoholic has only about 0.4% blood alcohol. To burn flesh from within, one would need 23%. That concentration is lethal long before any combustion occurs. So the researcher's first hypothesis collapsed completely. He did not give up, but returned with a new model. He compared the human body to a candle made of fat. Clothing acts as the wick, and fat provides the wax. An external spark can light the clothes and melt the fat. The melted fat then feeds a slow, localized burn. This process can reduce a large body to ash over hours. To test this, he bought a dead pig from the market. He wrapped it in a cotton blanket and poured on some gasoline. The gasoline simulated the initial external ignition source. He lit it and stepped back to watch the slow smolder. The pig did not burst into roaring flames at any point. Instead, it burned gently for about 5 hours continuously. The core temperature reached roughly 800 degrees Celsius. Objects half a meter away suffered only superficial heat damage. By the end, most of the pig had turned to fine ash. The room remained intact, with no spread of fire. The researcher was ecstatic about his candle analogy. He believed it perfectly explained the widow's case. The fire burned upward, so the ceiling socket melted, but the newspapers beside her remained completely safe. Her limbs had little fat, so the fire stopped at the ankle. That left her foot untouched inside its satin slipper. However, he overlooked a critical flaw in his logic. His experiment required an external flame to start burning. The gasoline was not an inner fire of life. It was a deliberate spark from outside the body. Moreover, the widow had been taking heavy sleeping medication. She also had a habit of smoking in her armchair. A dropped cigarette could easily have ignited her clothing. The sleeping pills would have prevented her from waking up. She would have lain still as the fire slowly consumed her. Forensic scientists call this well-known process the wick effect. It explains how a small flame can destroy an entire body. But the researcher refused to accept this conventional wisdom. He pointed to another case from the year 2010. A 76-year-old man was found dead in his home. The scene resembled the widow's case almost exactly. The official coroner, using modern forensic tools, wrote spontaneous combustion. The researcher saw this as final proof of his theory, yet he ignored a crucial detail from an older case. In 1966, a 92-year-old doctor suffered a similar fate. His bathtub contained a charred bathrobe and broken water pitcher. This evidence showed that he had tried to save himself. He had walked to the bathroom and removed his burning clothes. He attempted to splash water on the flames to extinguish them, but he was old and frail, and he dropped the pitcher. He fell down and could not get back up again. Then he slowly burned for several agonizing hours. This desperate struggle proves the fire was not instantaneous. It was a slow, painful, and preventable process. If someone had been present, they could have patted out the flames. The researcher, however, dismissed this evidence without consideration. He insisted that the fire of life kills instantly. He believed that death precedes the burning of flesh. But the broken pitcher tells a completely different story. It tells of a fight for survival against a small spark. It reveals that victims were not struck by magic. They were simply too weak to respond effectively. The common thread across all these cases is frailty. Most victims were elderly, living alone in isolation. Many had taken sedatives or consumed alcohol regularly. They lacked the strength even to roll over and smother the fire. Their obesity provided abundant fuel in the form of fat. Their isolation ensured that no one came to help them. In crowded cities, they died unseen and unheard. Their deaths became sensational headlines in local newspapers. But the truth is mundane, yet deeply tragic. There is no inner flame and no cosmic rule. There is only the intersection of aging, solitude, and accident. Modern society has created millions of such vulnerable individuals. We celebrate longevity, but forget the loneliness it brings. The researcher's obsession reveals a deeper human need. We want to believe in mysterious, uncontrollable forces. It is easier to blame nature than to confront social neglect. The fire of life is merely a poetic metaphor. It represents the vitality we lose as we grow old. But that vitality does not burst into actual flames. It simply fades slowly over many decades. And when it fades, we become fragile and helpless. A small accident then becomes a catastrophic event. The solution is not in laboratory experiments at all. It lies in community care and regular social check-ins. We must visit our elderly neighbors and relatives often. We must ensure they have working smoke detectors. We must not let them burn alone in silence. Scientific consensus is clear. Spontaneous combustion does not exist. Every claimed case has a rational, mundane explanation. Yet the myth persists because it fascinates and frightens us. It taps into our fear of sudden, inexplicable death. But we should instead fear the slow crisis of elderly isolation. The researcher in his dim workshop embodies this isolation himself. He is an old man working alone on a romantic idea. Perhaps he needs to believe in the fire because he fears his own fading. His theory is a mirror of his own mortality and loneliness. We leave him there, still convinced, still searching for answers. But we walk away with a clearer, more honest understanding. The only fire that consumes the elderly is the fire of neglect. That fire is not spontaneous. It is built by society's indifference. Extinguish that neglect, and you extinguish the myth forever. The next time you hear a story of a human candle, remember the broken pitcher. Remember the foot in the slipper, untouched by the flames. Remember that someone once tried to save themselves. They failed not because of magic, but because they were alone. And alone, we are all at risk of such a fate. So reach out to your grandparents and widowed aunts today. A simple knock on the door can make all the difference. Because the real flame, we should worry about burns in empty rooms. It burns in silence, waiting for no one to come. That is the true lesson we must learn from the ashes. We owe it to the vulnerable to keep that fire from starting, and we owe it to ourselves to see the truth clearly. There is no life fire, only life neglected. Let that be the final word on this old mystery.